What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first official episode of the Sharpe Reality. I am your host, Donovan Sharp. You can hit me anytime on Twitter at Donovan_Sharp. Also, be sure to like my Facebook page, and of course, if you want your questions or comments read on the air, or if you want to tell me that I live in my mother's basement and haven't had sex in decades, I've got a neck beard and I weigh 400 pounds or something to that effect, go to the contact section on thesharpereality.com. That's the Sharpe, TheSharpeReality.com. You can also find links to my articles on Return of Kings, and of course, feel free to leave a donation at the bottom of the page. Now, before I get started here, I'd like to apologize for my amateurism here, my lack of bells and whistles. I am very new at this, and I will add things as we go along. I know I don't have fancy intro music or fancy sound effects. I don't know how that stuff works at this point in time. I know that my P's and S's are a little loud, so I know that I'll need to invest in a pop filter, as my consultant told me the other day. So just bear with me as we get this thing off the ground. We will certainly make improvements as time goes on and get this thing really dialed in for you guys. So, this past Friday, I was on with Obsidian on Obsidian Radio. And me and a few other like minded gentlemen talked about a number of issues related to men. We talked about sex, we talked about marriage, we talked about dating, we talked about dealing with your children. We had one caller who was having trouble with the New York City public education system. We talked about a number of things, and it ended up being a very educational conversation for me. So my personal thanks goes out to Obsidian for having me on. That was the very first time I had ever been on any sort of radio, live, internet, in person, or otherwise. And that was sort of my maiden voyage, so to speak. So again, my thanks goes out to Obsidian. Definitely follow this guy on Twitter at Obsidian Files. You can also go to blogtalkradio.com/Obsidian Radio Live to check out any of his podcasts. The guy definitely knows what he's talking about. He's got a good point of view. And starting in 2017, I'll be making regular appearances on his show so that you can also listen to me on his show as well. So thank you again. Now, this being my very first podcast episode, I felt it fitting for me to give you my origin story. We all like a good origin story, how people came to be. So I'm going to delve into that topic as well. So, about a year and a half ago, maybe a little longer, I wrote an article called The Benefits of Being a Late Bloomer. And in that article, I briefly described the four relationships that eventually led me to the manosphere. Um, I I detailed I detailed all four relationships. I didn't get into. I briefly described my marriage. I described my relationship with quote unquote Amy, the one that did the most damage emotionally to me. I also talked about a relationship or lack thereof with a girl that I foolishly rented an apartment for, got utilities in my name, paid her electric bill, only to find out that she was fucking her ex con baby daddy while I was in jail for a week. That was an interesting story to be sure. But the fourth story, the relationship the relationship that eventually led me to the manosphere was ironically the most insignificant and the shortest, and cost me, it didn't take its pound of flesh from me, but it was eye opening to be sure. So, shortly after getting my heart broken by Amy, I moved to Atlanta. I only spent 6 months there because I didn't really, that was the second time I had lived in Atlanta. My mother and brother were there. Didn't really like the city, didn't like the people, so I knew that I knew I wasn't going to be there for an extended period of time. So I saved up my money and lived in Atlanta for 6 months, and then I moved out here to the West Coast. Well, shortly after moving here, I got a telemarketing job. Telemarketing jobs, as we all know, aren't the most glamorous, but I was looking to start my life over. You have to start somewhere, so I said I'm just going to take the first thing that's available, and lo and behold, the telemarketing job was available. And so that's what I ended up doing. Anyway, in my training class, I met this chick. We'll call her Susie, 25 years old, Mexican girl, decent body, big tits. I'd probably put her at around a six, maybe a six and a half. So throughout the training class, her and I flirted very, very hard with each other. Everyone knew we were going to hook up eventually, and some even thought that we were fucking at that point in time. That's how obvious it was. Well, in the first few days of getting to know her, I learned a few things about her that should have scared me completely away, but didn't, because of course I was still a beta blue pill male. I was probably closer to a shade of purple, but I still didn't have the knowledge that I have today about women and their true nature and what they're really about. So here is what I learned about her. First of all, she was divorced, and she admitted to me that she had cheated on her husband throughout the marriage, which is typical. Of course, she blamed him. He wasn't attentive enough. He was never home. He was working all the time, etc., etc. I actually called her out because I asked her, I said, well, did he cheat on you? She said, well, yeah. And that's his fault too. She literally said that to me. I said, okay, so wait a minute. So he cheats on you, it's his fault. I get it. I understand. He's a scumbag, whatever. But you cheat on him, and it's still his fault. And of course, she didn't have anything to say about that. The second thing I learned about her is that she had a young son who she describes in her own words was insufferable. So she described her own son as insufferable, which to me just blew my mind. Of course, parents always have a hard time with their children. That's no secret, but to describe them to other people as insufferable was definitely a red flag. So I knew right off the bat she probably wasn't a very good mother, probably selfish. She also told me that her parents were on the verge of kicking her out. And because of that, her boyfriend, who she had only known for a week, was in the midst of getting an apartment for the both of them. So she's living with her parents. She's about to get kicked out. She meets this guy, and in a week or so, whatever she told me, he was working on getting an apartment for the both of them. Yet she was still flirting hard with me. So again, this is the duplicitous nature of women. Women never get wet. There's always another raft or another branch to swing to. So even as she was setting up her main domicile, she was still looking for the alpha fucks to her beta bucks. The game never ends. Here is where things really got interesting. The last week of training, her boyfriend completely ghosts on her. No calls, no texts. He just completely disappears from the picture, which means now she's not going to have a place to stay. So she's freaking out, telling everyone who will listen wondering where she's going to live, blah, 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 blah. I remember on break one afternoon, she even asked me, hey, would you like to be roommates? And I just told her flat out, no, I barely know you. Of course, all of the red flags that I knew about her at that point certainly factored into my decision, but I had only been in the city that I was at for, I don't know, maybe a month, month and a half. I wasn't about to become roommates with somebody that I didn't really know that well. All I knew is that I wanted to fuck her. That was it. Doesn't mean I wanted to live with her. And this was all before red pill awareness. Well, she got lucky because one of the girls in our training class offered to let her stay until she found a place of her own. We'll call this woman Teresa. So Teresa moved all of her stuff into her tiny little one-bedroom apartment with her son. I think she slept on the futon in her living room. I don't know if her son slept with her in the futon. He probably slept on the floor, what have you. Whatever the case may be, she got lucky. She got a parachute. So fast forward to that Friday. We all graduate from training. We had the typical celebration, pizza, cake, certificates with our names on it, congratulating us for making it through training class. And so we all decided to, hey, let's celebrate. Let's, go to the club that. So me, Susie, and a few other chicks, along with Teresa, we go to this club, and of course we get shit-faced. And at the end of the night, Susie and I end up back at Teresa's place, and I ended up fucking her right there on Teresa's futon in the living room while Teresa was in her room trying to sleep off the alcohol. So that weekend was very, very cool. The three of us hung out. We were kind of the three musketeers. We went to a couple of flea markets, went to the movies. We just kind of gelled and became friends. Susie and I were all in this, new bliss. We're fucking every chance we got, being all affectionate, just all the stupid stuff that comes in the beginning of a relationship. Well, Susie ended up finding a place the following weekend, so she moved out of Teresa's. Well, that was the beginning of the end. And I very quickly found out, just spending time with her at her apartment, that Susie was very lazy. Her place was always a mess. Her son was out of control, and she didn't really seem to care. All she did was yell at him. There was no discipline. She was a bad mom. She could barely, I mean, she could barely cook. She was just a low quality woman. And it didn't take me very long to figure this out. I stuck around probably 2 weeks longer than I should have because the sex was good. I mean, she could suck and fuck with the best of them. And I didn't have any other prospects. I hadn't been in town but for a month and a half, 2 months at that point. So I didn't have any other prospects. All I knew is that I had this Mexican girl with big tits who I could fuck pretty much anytime I wanted. So, I stuck around. This is what we do. Well, eventually I knew that her deficiencies would outweigh the sex, and that time came. So one Saturday, I jumped in my car, rode over to her house. I walked in her door. I said, "You know what, Susie, this isn't working out. We're just going to have to go our separate ways." And to my surprise, Susie reacted very nonchalantly about it. She just kind of looked at me and said, "Okay, well, if that's what you want to do, I guess it's time for us to move on." I, okay, no problem. I was a little bit surprised, but I was just glad that she didn't cause a bunch of drama about it. So I left, and that was that. Well, a few hours later, I get a call from Teresa, and she tells me, "Yeah, I just got off the phone with Susie, and she told me that you had broken up with her." I said, "Yeah, I kind of explained the situation, blah, 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 blah." And of course, Teresa being a woman, "Yeah, I saw that too." And I mean, women badmouth each other behind each other's back. That's just how it is. And so I said, "Well, how is she doing?" She says, "Well, she's actually doing pretty good. Her voice sounded strong, and she's getting ready to go out on a date." And I said, "Well, wait a minute, she's getting ready to go out on a date? I dumped her just a few hours ago." She says, "Yeah, she's been talking to this guy. She says she really likes him. He's going to pick her up, and they're going to go out on a date." Now, I wasn't hurt by this because I was only with her for 3 weeks. I didn't develop anything close to real feelings. She was somebody else's problem now. I knew that whatever that guy wanted to do, I didn't care. Be that as it may, this girl was supposed to be into me, okay? And yeah, I'd gone in and dumped her, but my ego took a bit of a body blow because she instantly just got over me. So later on that night, I went on to Google and I researched. I sat there and Googled, why do girls get over breakups so easily? And eventually that led me to the manosphere. I discovered all sorts of websites. I discovered, of course, Return of Kings, Roosh V, the Roosh V Forum, The Rational Male, Illimitable Men, Chateau Artiste. So for about 2 weeks, I consumed every piece of red pill material I could get my hands on. I was soaking this stuff up like a sponge because it jived with every circuit of my masculine hard drive. Everything that was boiling at the surface in terms of what I was seeing from women and what I was being told, I knew that something didn't add up. And for the first time in my life, I saw proof and evidence that yes, my suspicions, my inklings, my instincts were correct. Shit is fucked up, and this is how to unfuck them, so to speak. So I whittled down eventually, you whittle down your manosphere buffet down to a few sites.